Hello and welcome to MRCPsych on the Go Revision Essentials. My name is Dr. Alapasurlicker and I'm a psychiatry trainee in the west of Scotland. Like many of you, I spent a lot of time commuting. This was valuable time that I could have spent revising for the MRCPsych examination. And so, I've started this podcast to help you revise on the go. Each episode breaks down one high-yield topic mapped to the syllabus. This is then followed by 5 questions to help reinforce your learning. So, grab your headphones, turn travel time into revision time, and let's get started. Right now, your senses are estimated to be taking in somewhere around 11 million bits of information every second. But your conscious awareness, some researchers put that figure as low as 40 bits a second. So, where does all the rest of it go? And who or what is steering the ship while you're not looking? This episode begins a new section of the syllabus, States and Levels of Awareness. Over the next few episodes, we'll cover consciousness, attention, sleep, and altered states like hypnosis and meditation. Today, we start with the most basic question. What does it mean to be conscious, and how much of the mind works outside conscious awareness? Consciousness exists at different levels. The most influential early model came from Sigmund Freud in his topographical model of the mind. Freud trained originally as a neurologist in Vienna. In his 20s, he researched cocaine, briefly promoting it as a wonder drug before its dangers became clear. His consulting room was famously crowded with ancient artifacts, a collection he was fond of calling his old and grubby gods. Freud described 3 levels: the conscious, containing everything you're aware of right now; the preconscious, holding material not currently in awareness but easy to retrieve, like a memory you weren't thinking about until someone mentioned it; and the unconscious, material actively kept out of awareness because Freud believed it was too threatening, including repressed wishes and conflicts. This model is often pictured as an iceberg, a small visible tip above the waterline as the conscious mind, and a much larger mass hidden beneath as the unconscious. Have a look online for a picture of this. It'll help you remember the topographical model better. Remember, Freud's topographical model describes 3 levels of awareness: the conscious, the preconscious, and the unconscious, often pictured as an iceberg with the unconscious as the much larger hidden mass beneath the surface. Modern cognitive psychology sees the unconscious differently. Rather than a store of repressed conflict, the cognitive unconscious is simply automatic information processing that happens outside awareness, because the brain cannot bring everything it processes into conscious attention at once. So, we now have 2 ideas of the unconscious: Freud's dynamic unconscious, shaped by repression and conflict, and the cognitive unconscious, shaped by ordinary automatic processing. Remember, the cognitive unconscious describes automatic processing outside awareness. This differs from Freud's dynamic unconscious, which involves active repression of threatening material. Is there real evidence that unconscious processing happens? Yes, and several well-established findings support it. The first is subliminal priming. In a landmark 1998 study published in the journal Nature, the French neuroscientist Stanislas Dehaene flashed number words too briefly to consciously see, masking them immediately afterwards. Then asked participants to judge whether a following visible number was bigger or smaller than 5. Participants could never identify the hidden prime, yet they judged the visible number faster when the 2 matched. Brain scans showed the same number processing regions activating as when the prime was fully visible. The brain had processed its meaning without it ever reaching awareness. Remember, subliminal priming shows that stimuli below the threshold of conscious awareness can still influence later behaviour. The second is implicit memory. Memory that shapes behaviour without any conscious recollection of learning it. Picture this. A woman with severe amnesia caused by Korsakoff's syndrome meets the same neurologist every single day and forgets his face the moment he leaves the room. One morning in Geneva, Edouard Claperet hides a small pin between his fingers. He reaches out, shakes her hand and pricks her. The next day, he walks in and offers his hand again, as he always does. She hesitates. She pulls her hand back. Claperet asks why. She can't say. She just doesn't want to. She had no conscious memory of him, of the pin, or of yesterday at all. But something in her had clearly learned to be careful. Claperet went on to found Geneva's Institute, where he mentored a young researcher early in his career, a man named Jean Piaget. The third is the distinction between controlled and automatic processing, formalised in 1977 by Walter Schneider and Richard Schifrin. Controlled processing is slow, effortful, and needs conscious attention, like learning to drive for the first time. Automatic processing is fast, effortless, and runs largely outside awareness, like driving a familiar route without consciously thinking about the mechanics at all. Try this for a second. Say the alphabet out loud from A to Z. Now try saying it backwards from Z to A. Feel the difference? The first was automatic. Practiced so many times, it runs almost by itself. The second forced you back into controlled processing. With enough practice, controlled processes can become automatic too, which is exactly why driving eventually frees up enough attention to hold a conversation at the same time. Schifrin was no stranger to memory research. A decade earlier, he'd co-developed the Atkinson-Schifrin model, the classic multi-store theory, splitting memory into sensory, short-term and long-term stores. Remember, Schneider and Schifrin distinguished controlled processing, slow and effortful, from automatic processing, fast and largely outside conscious awareness. The fourth comes from how the brain handles emotional threat. Studies using briefly flashed, fearful faces, too fast to consciously perceive, show the amygdala still responds to them. This work, from researchers including Paul Whelan and Arne Uman, shows the brain can register a threat and begin preparing a fear response before the stimulus is ever consciously seen. Uman's research found something else striking. People condition fear responses to evolutionarily relevant threats, like snakes and spiders, far faster than to neutral objects like flowers or mushrooms. It suggests an ancient alarm system running well below conscious thought. Remember, the amygdala can respond to briefly presented, consciously unperceived emotional stimuli, suggesting a fast and conscious pathway for threat detection. Two more ideas are worth knowing, though the evidence is weaker. Freud pointed to slips of the tongue, or parapraxis, as evidence of unconscious conflict. It's an appealing idea, but the evidence is anecdotal, not experimental. Separately, split brain studies in patients whose hemispheres have been surgically disconnected show one hemisphere can act on information the other can't consciously report. That's a real finding, but it demonstrates hemispheric specialization more than a Freudian unconscious, even though the two are often mentioned together. Why does this matter clinically, It underpins the concept of insight and why patients can't always give a full, conscious account of what's driving their own behaviour. Korsakoff's syndrome gives a striking example. Patients often confabulate, confidently producing detailed, plausible memories to fill the gaps left by their amnesia with no awareness that anything they're saying is invented. It's the same disconnect we saw in Claparede's patient. A genuine belief that has nothing to do with what actually happened. We'll cover Korsakoff's syndrome properly in the next episode, including its diagnosis and management, alongside a closer look at Freud himself. For now, it's also worth noting the relevance to defense mechanisms and to dissociative states, where memory and identity can become disconnected from awareness altogether. And it's a useful reminder that "I don't know why I did that" can be an entirely honest answer. Now, let's test your recall. I'll read out 5 exam-style questions. After each one, I'll pause for 10 seconds so you can attempt it before hearing the answer. Question 1. What 3 levels of consciousness did Freud describe? The conscious, the preconscious, and the unconscious. Question 2. How does the cognitive unconscious differ from Freud's dynamic unconscious? The cognitive unconscious refers to automatic processing outside awareness. Freud's dynamic unconscious involves the active repression of threatening material. Question 3. What did Claparede's pinprick case demonstrate? Implicit memory. A patient with amnesia developed a learned avoidance response to a handshake, despite no conscious memory of the incident that caused it. Question 4. What's the difference between controlled and automatic processing? Controlled processing is slow, effortful, and needs conscious attention. Automatic processing is fast, effortless, and runs largely outside conscious awareness. Question 5. What did studies of masked fearful faces show about the amygdala? It can respond to fearful faces presented too briefly to be consciously perceived, suggesting a fast, unconscious pathway for threat detection. Let's summarise what we've learned today. Freud's topographical model describes 3 levels of awareness: the conscious, the preconscious, and the unconscious. The modern cognitive unconscious reframes this as automatic information, processing rather than repressed conflict. Evidence for unconscious processing includes subliminal priming, implicit memory, as shown in Claparede's pinprick case, the split between controlled and automatic processing, and unconscious amygdala responses to emotional threat. We've seen how much of the mind works without our awareness. But awareness itself isn't fixed. It rises and falls, and can be sharpened or dulled. Join us next time as we explore arousal, attention, and alertness, and ask why you can suddenly hear your own name spoken across a room full of noise. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of MRCPsych on the Go Revision Essentials. I hope this episode helped to move your revision forward. If you have any questions or just want to continue the discussion, you can find me on LinkedIn at MRCPsych on the Go. spelt MRCPsych on the go. This podcast is about making revision accessible. If you found it useful, liking and sharing it with others helps the goal more than anything else. That's it for today. I'm Dr. Alappus Ehrlicher, and as always, keep revising on the go.